Dear viewers, forests don't die with press releases. Tiger corridors don't file objections in bullet points. They disappear quietly, one clearance at a time. On paper, everything looks fine. Clean files, orderly minutes, reassuring language. On the ground, something else starts to fracture. This is the story of Lhar Dongri, 36 hectares of reserved forest in Chandrapur of Maharashtra. A narrow green strip that looks insignificant on a map but holds an entire landscape together. It connects Tadoba Andhari Tiger Reserve to forests stretching toward Gadchiroli, Umred, Navegaon and Nagzira. Tigers don't pass through it occasionally, they depend on it. Experts within the system said this forest should not be touched. Yet, in January 2026, it was cleared. Not for coal, not for public emergency, but for a private iron ore mine for a private company. Hello, I'm Tejas and you're watching Honest Take on Lokmat Times. Before we start today's story, our humble request. Please do subscribe to Lokmat Times if you haven't already and press the bell icon to never miss an update. The proposal was simple on paper. An open cast iron ore mine at Lohardongri inside reserve forest. Project proponent Sunflag Iron and Steel Company Limited. Forest land sought about 36 hectares. Mine life anywhere between 12 and 50 years depending on which document you read. Jobs promised around 120. Permanent jobs 32. So why are ecologists and environmentalists losing it? Because this patch sits inside a critical tiger corridor, not adjacent, not nearby, inside it. Forest officers knew it, wildlife NGOs documented it, and in 2023, even the Maharashtra State Board for Wildlife acknowledged it. In October 2023, the State Board looked at this proposal and said no. Not a casual no, a serious one. They set up 3-member expert committee to study the site, the animals, the conflict history, the economics. The committee went to the ground, walked the forest, spoke to villagers, studied movement patterns, and then they wrote something unusually blunt for a government report. Mining here, they said, would cause irreversible environmental damage. It would fragment a corridor already under pressure. It would worsen human-tiger conflict in a district already recording among the highest tiger-related human deaths in India. Their conclusion was not hedged. It did not ask for more mitigation. It did not suggest redesign. It said clearly, the project is not recommended. The Wildlife Board's own standing committee agreed. In January 2024, it reiterated that mining should not be allowed in this corridor. At that point, the story should have ended, but it did not. Fast forward to late January 2026, the Wildlife Board meets again. The chair, then Deputy Chief Minister Devendra Fadnavis. Same forest, same company, same corridor, same expert report, warning of irreversible damage. And yet, this time, the board approves the project with conditions, with mitigation measures, with language that sounds responsible. So what changed? Not the tiger population, not the corridor's importance, not the conflict data. What changed was interpretation. The earlier expert report, which clearly advised rejection, was now read as something that allowed the project to be sent forward with safeguards. The earlier standing committee's no was treated as provisional, and the project was cleared at the state wildlife level and forwarded to the National Board for Wildlife. This is where the story stops being about ecology and starts becoming about process. Let's strip this of sentiment and look at numbers. Forest to be diverted, 36 hectares of reserved forest. Trees to be felled, over 18,000. Species affected, tigers, leopards, sloth bears, wild dogs, deer, boar, hyenas. Tigers using this very patch, at least 5, documented. Now the human context. Chandrapur district records roughly 50 human deaths every year due to tiger attacks. In 2025 alone, 47 people were killed. In Brahmapuri division where Lohardongri sits, conflict has already forced repeated captures and relocations of tigers. This isn't a pristine wilderness versus people story. This is a people and wildlife already in crisis story. The expert committee made a point most politicians avoid saying out loud. The cost of compensation for deaths, injuries, livestock loss and disruption is likely to exceed the economic benefit of the mine. Against this, what does the project offer? About 120 jobs, only 32 permanent, many requiring skills local villagers may not have. A compensatory afforestation site in Yavatmal district, because apparently a forest in Chandrapur can be replaced by trees somewhere else. and mitigation plans that assume tigers will read PowerPoint presentations and politely adjust their routes. Here is the most dangerous lie in modern environmental governance, that every ecological loss can be mitigated. Corridors don't work like that. You can't relocate a corridor the way you shift a road. You can't compensate fragmentation with fencing and funds. Once a narrow passage is broken, animals don't detour neatly. They spill into fields, villages, highways. The committee warned of exactly this. They noted that roads, haulage paths, dust, noise, and human presence would expand the zone of disturbance far beyond the 36 hectares on paper. They noted that even a 600-meter approach road would slice through habitat, and they said what many officials privately admit but rarely record: some damage cannot be undone. If this feels familiar, it should. This is not the first mining project approved inside a tiger corridor in Chandrapur. Coal mining has already punched holes through adjacent landscapes, with approvals justified in the name of national interest. What makes Lohardongri different is scale and purpose. This is not about energy security. This is not about a public sector undertaking. This is a private iron ore mine, offering modest local employment inside one of the most conflict-prone tiger landscapes in the country. And it was cleared against the advice of the state's own experts. That's the part that should unsettle everyone, regardless of where they stand politically. This case tells us three uncomfortable truths. First, expert committees matter only until they don't. They are consulted, quoted, thanked, and then quietly overruled. Second, wildlife boards are no longer guardians. They are clearance points. If a proposal can be wrapped up in a language of mitigation, it can pass. And third, conflict-affected communities are being sold a dangerous illusion that mining will bring development without increasing risk, that jobs will outweigh fear, that forests can be swapped like land parcels. The people who will pay the price are not sitting in boardrooms. They are farmers who stop sending children to school when a tiger is sighted. They are families who wait for compensation after a death that should have never happened. Of course, this approval is not the final word. The project still needs clearance from the National Board for Wildlife. It still needs forest clearance from the center. It still needs environmental clearance under the EIA process. Each of these stages will test whether institutions are willing to read their own records honestly, because the evidence is already on file. A state-appointed expert committee said no. The Standing Committee of the Wildlife Board said no. The conflict data screams no. And yet, a yes has been manufactured. So here is my honest take. Forests don't protest. Tigers don't vote. Corridors don't trend on social media. They rely entirely on human restraint. When a state clears mining inside a critical corridor despite its own experts warning of irreversible harm, it isn't just approving a project. It is setting a precedent that expertise is optional, that ecology is negotiable, that coexistence is expendable. And once that precedent is set, Lhar Dongri won't be the last corridor to fall silent. And that is today's honest take.